Welcome back. I'm Dr. Luke Maynard. You're watching a Cynehelm webcast, and this is part 3 of Numinous Beings Are We, Dead Hands, Dark Fathers, and the Gothic Materiality of Star Wars. In part 2, we talked about various devices from Gothic criticism and how they relate to the Star Wars saga. We considered the stylized religious conflict of the 18th century Protestant English Gothic, the proto-Gothic notions of the sublime and picturesque as they play out in the film's settings, and also the ironic relationship between organic life as a symbol of progressive bourgeois futurity and supposedly futuristic mechanized technology as the symbol of an oppressive, regressive, even medieval past. We finished with a look at the ways this Gothic reversal of the machine leads us to think about one of the key ideas of Gothic criticism, what Cantor calls the dead hand of the past trying to maintain its grip on the living. In this conclusion, we'll have a closer look at what role that symbol plays in the context of the beloved family saga, which is famous for its fascination with bodily mutilation, as it somehow manages to cram 14 severed hands and arms into 6 movies, not to mention at least 5 heads and a few other bits and pieces here and there. We really shouldn't be at all surprised that a world like this has perfected artificial hand technology. It's a dangerous galaxy for people with opposable thumbs to live in. And so, when Luke severs Vader's hand at the end of Return of the Jedi, that's severed hand 14 of 14, he ought not to be surprised that someone beat him to it. Appropriately enough for a man given over to the Gothic machine, Vader's final severed hand is a mechanical hand. Of all the hands we see in this film, it's this one that most fully embodies what Gothic scholars call the dead hand of the past. Its menacing gestures are not only figurative, but they're literalized in the, I think, underappreciated performance of Bristol weightlifter Dave Prowse within the suit of Vader, who gives us, in an otherwise completely hidden performance, this one unusually active hand that accuses, grasps, beckons, and crushes a hand at the center of a cinematic obsession with disembodied hands. Vader, a Sith who channels his own hatred and fear into aggression against others, exploits his own bodily obsessions with severed limbs and the inability to breathe, and makes those qualities the foundation of almost all the harm he inflicts on other characters. Before cutting somebody's hand off with a lightsaber became so commonplace that the expanded universe developed a name for the technique. Yes, diehards, it's chomai. Before that, we could psychoanalyze Vader's choice to cut Luke's hand off in the duel on Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back. It has become maybe one of the most iconic scenes of the original trilogy, and of course Vader's reaching out a hand to his son after the big reveal is deliciously ironic. But when Luke deals the same blow to Vader in Return of the Jedi, we have a scene that's much richer in Gothic resonance. Luke's comparison of the hand to his own with horror rhymes with the memento mori moment of seeing his own face behind Vader's mask in The Empire Strikes Back. Yoda's comment at the cave, "Your weapons, you will not need them," is mirrored here as he throws away his lightsaber following a moment of abject epiphany. Here, the human body, the corpse, and the machine are united in the moment of horror that caps the climax of the Star Wars saga and allows him to reach his rejection of the Oedipal myth. For Julia Kristeva in Powers of Horror, it's the corpse that creates the greatest moment of abjection, especially the corpse of a parent, which forces us to confront the myth of our own material nature and either succumb to that myth or defeat it. The shared experience of the abject hand, a Gothic counterfeit possessed by both father and son, is the most perilous moment of Luke's redemptive quest. Yoda anticipates this moment as well in The Empire Strikes Back, when he counsels Luke, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." While we never see Yoda give Luke a single lesson with physical weaponry, he teaches Luke to see beyond the physical plane, gives him eyes denied to Oedipus. At the moment of confrontation, what Luke realizes is not superficial anatomical symmetry of sharing prosthetics with his father, but the deeper symmetry of what those prosthetics mean, a temptation toward counterfeit life in service to the machine. In a sense, Luke rejects the Oedipal cycle by refusing to kill his father and take his place. On the other hand, so to speak, his solution to conflict so far has been to drive his father to the edge of a bottomless shaft, cut off his hand, and then ask his father to join him and cross over to the opposite side of the Force. In a purely Oedipal mode, then, Luke has already repeated his father's steps. He's already passed over the threshold and ought to be irredeemable. The symbolic castration of the act, particularly the destruction of Vader's expressive, articulate, all-important hand, should mean that the Oedipal cycle is now complete. The saving grace for Luke here is that the wound he has dealt is not actually identical, and the acts are not quite as parallel as a surface reading of the films would suggest. What are the differences? It comes back to the symbolism of the machine, the material object fashioned as a Gothic counterfeit to organic life. Vader's severing of Luke's biological hand, like Dooku's severing of Anakin's, isn't just an act of symbolic castration, but one of corruption. The mechanical hand goes on to represent forever the capacity for Vader's darkness to become hereditary. It's a symbol of Vader's presence in Luke, and a punishment for too eagerly rushing into the Oedipal conflict, which we've seen here is meant to be resisted as, at best, a counterfeit struggle. The hand represents the sins of the father literally grafted onto his flesh, and the suddenly real threat that the dead mechanical hand of the past need not die with the Dark Father, but can continue on to corrupt the child. In this context, and in spite of its symmetry, Luke's severing of Vader's hand is not an act of vengeance or even retribution. It's a fatal attack against the mechanical tissue of Darth Vader rather than the organic tissue of Anakin Skywalker. It's the death blow right in the circuits that kills Darth Vader and sets Anakin Skywalker free. It's an Oedipal fulfillment against Anakin's shadow self, but a rescuing of his ego. A Gothic reading of abjection here allows us to see within the violence a gesture of atonement. Just as the symbolism of The Empire Strikes Back teaches Luke that the specter of the mechanistic, corpse-like past can still thrive in an organic body, the reversal in Return of the Jedi teaches Vader the lesson he has steadfastly refused to learn, that the spark of organic life can also reside in the machine. Luke's destruction of the mechanical hand is a sign that the dead hand of the past can be rejected, a fact Vader finally accepts when he seizes the Emperor, his own Gothic figure, and sends him into the void, throwing the symbolic dead hand of the past after the literal hand, so that his own death is the last step to completing the Gothic cycle of Luke's birthright and providence. There's a lot more to say about the Star Wars saga, both in general and in terms of revisiting the films as a Gothic story in the classic English tradition of Gothic novelists like Anne Radcliffe, Matthew Lewis, and Horace Walpole. I don't intend for this talk to be an exhaustive look at the Gothic elements of Star Wars. We certainly haven't sounded the depths of a Gothic reading here by any stretch. What we have done, I hope, is unearthed enough significant parallels and had a fruitful enough look at some of the main Gothic tropes to change and broaden the way that we look at Star Wars going forward. I've done a lot of talking here today, and I hope some of it has changed the way you think about these films. But the very best literary criticism, whether it comes out of an Ivy League university classroom or over the counter of a convenience store in small-town New Jersey, as in Clerks, is developed in dialogue. Literary criticism can and should be a social activity, and I can't wait to learn what other people come up with following this road of reasoning, especially as our understanding of the Gothic advances, and a whole new series of Star Wars stories unroll on the silver screen. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in more content. I can't wait to see what people come up with, and I hope to see you next time here on Cynehelm.